Greetings! I'm here once again to talk about Brexit because it is, one of the subjects I go on about a bit, but also it's been on the news a lot, with all the Brexit negotiations and how well they're going. And obviously, then you get, social media is, full of people talking about, you know, what they think should be going on, and because of who I follow, and I get everything from fellow anime geeks to occasional political person who I follow sometimes because of non-political reasons. Um, Alistair Campbell, Tony Blair's former spin doctor. I follow his Twitter account not because of his political views, but because of his views on mental health. But obviously he tweets about politics as well. So I see that. I see all sorts of people's views, and it's like, yeah, I don't think anyone's happy with the way things are going at the moment. But I mean, I. Oh, I'm gonna keep that in. I've just recorded a previous thing, a moment ago, and I've just tweeted someone that I was recording it, and they said, they look forward to seeing the response. Right, but back to Brexit. I don't think we can get out of it. There are some people who say, we should stop it. It's not going to work. We should, put the brakes on and just stay in the EU. Even as a Remain supporter, I'd be sceptical, though, of anything other than another referendum reliably indicating a national change of mind, or, say, if the recent UK elections had, say, completely gone away from the Tories, a proper, has legal and political clout, no, we don't want this, I think would be the only way to reverse the decision without getting a lot of people's backs up. Because, like it or not, and I'm in the not camp, but, it was 52% in favour of leave. The only way to say we shouldn't leave would be to have at least 52%, well, I guess at least 51, but, there need to be a similar proper result in the other direction. Because I think there'd be backlash if they just tried to reverse course at this point. I don't think it would work. Also, I don't think, Europe would be exactly very happy with us. Understandably so. Why should they? We've just been dicking them around for over a year. Now, my thoughts are, if there'd been a large majority in either direction, that would have signalled a clear desire either for completely embracing the European Union or just completely turning our backs on it. But we didn't get that. We got an almost 50-50 split. 52 to 48, it's clearly a leave result. But to me, it's also clearly a desire for a soft Brexit. Because it's quite literally slightly more out than in. That sounds like it would be a great innuendo. But, it seems that, people didn't exactly flock in droves to go, let's get the hell out of this thing. But similarly, not everybody was going, no, let's stay in. It's a case of, it's good points either way, but we just seem to be slightly more in favour of being out than in. But that says that it's like, there's enough advantages to being in that we don't want to turn our backs and all of that. But similarly, there's enough costs to being in that nobody's exactly convinced to completely defend it. So, now, I think one of the problems that we have, in the UK at least, is that it's very, very easy to see directly the costs of being in the European Union. We know what money we have to send to the EU. We know what they tell us that we can and can't do. Restrictions and effectively taxes and stuff like that. That's a very, very obvious cost. The benefits are a lot less direct, no less real, but they're not as obvious. We don't, I think, get as much of the direct benefits of being in the EU than some would like, but that doesn't mean we don't benefit from it. There are other parts of Europe that clearly benefit. Because stuff like they're all part of the same landmass, or for example, in the case of in the case of Germany, they lost World War Two, but I think that part of what's helped them to build up has been the EU, and also they get a direct benefit. The other kind of mainland, continental Europe countries get various levels of direct benefit, especially for stuff like the Schengen zone, which we opted out of. I guess also in part because we're geographically separate. We get a lot of benefits from being in the EU, but none of them I think are quite as direct. We benefit from the EU existing, I think, more than we necessarily benefit from being in the EU. But obviously those benefits are increased by being in the EU, but also I think us being in the EU increases the effects, because the stronger an alliance is, the stronger an alliance is, as soon as it starts to fragment, it runs the risk of falling apart. So us pulling out runs the risk of destabilizing stuff, and then we will get hit by the side effects of the destabilization. And there are some people who I think would just love the EU to fall apart, but I don't think it's entirely coincidental that kind of Europe hasn't had any large scale wars for about the same amount of time that they've been building up the EU. I think it might not be the main reason, but I think it's certainly contributing cause, because not everybody agrees, but it's more akin to, I think I might have even said it in a previous video, it's more akin to a squabble around the dining room table than a punch up in the car park. It keeps it relatively civil and keeps it relatively stable, and we benefit from that. But we don't technically have to be in to benefit from that. So I guess I can see why some people go, well, why don't we leave them? We'll benefit from the existence of it, but yeah, we don't really want to be paying into it if we don't get loads of direct stuff. Because I think in the case of the UK, some of the restrictions that work well on the continent don't necessarily work as well here. But you want to be part of a club, you've got to have a level playing field. You've got to stick to the same rules. And we already had an awful lot of kind of wriggle room that other countries didn't, and we tried to get even more. And then our lot basically said, no, it's not good enough. And yeah, so now we want out, and we still want better. And that is where it really starts to fall apart. We will not win a perfect deal where we get everything we want. Neither side will. The EU won't either. Each side will have to make some compromises. That you have to do a bit of give and take. Each side will have to make compromises regardless of who ultimately holds the upper hand. The EU will have to make some concessions to us, but mark my words, we will also need to make concessions to them. We can't get the benefits without the costs. We couldn't inside the EU. We definitely won't outside. At least unless things change for the bulk of the EU, the free movement of goods and the free movement of people are intrinsically linked. So if we want to be part of the the free market, then we have to do the free movement of people. If we want to have control over our borders, we will have trade restrictions. That's just You know, the whole thing is it's an either or situation, and you know we don't have to like it. It doesn't change the fact. And also, and here's something that I think some people don't get: the EU won't be penalising us if they bargain hard. They have to weigh the desires of 27 countries against those of a single one. They aren't going to do anything potentially self-destructive. You know, they're not going to do stuff that's going to then make a whole lot of infighting happen. You know, and they've got to try to do stuff to preserve the peace for the 27 countries that have remained, that have at least so far decided to remain together. You know, they have to be nice to the people who are still around the family dining table, not the one grumpy old uncle who stormed off in a huff. You know, he can cool his own jets in his own room, playing his video. Or is that just me when I'm anxiety is high? Never mind. Um, Only joking. I'll never have Christmases that go quite that bad unless I'm actually physically ill. Those have ruined my moods on the past. But yeah, you know, they have to kind of maintain harmony within the EU. So yeah, you know, they have to get stuff that 27 people will agree to. It's more important that those 27 agree in a way than we do. So you know, they're not necessarily trying to penalise us if things don't go our way. It's just obviously they need to make sure things go their way. And also there will be some sort of divorce bill. Of course there will. You know, to give an analogy, do we really want to be that housemate who agrees to share bills, then buggers off, leaving the rest to deal with costs that were agreed with in part because everybody was chipping in? You know, things that we currently pay into the EU for are not necessarily for now. They're kind of ongoing things that we were a part of the initial agreement for. We can't just kind of go, well, we don't want to pay for this that we agreed to pay for, so we're going to back out and stop paying for something that's already been agreed to because we were paying for it in the first place. We can't do that. There will be some level of payment that we have to make. That's just the way it goes. But the difference is, going forward, it will be a bulk payment and not ongoing. So, you know, if you don't want to pay your ongoing stuff, you know, I mean, heck, think of it the other way around. You know, if you often if you leave a company because there's been some kind of large scale restructure, or even for other reasons, you find that, you know, people will be offered a severance package, and it's kind of like you get given a lot of money to leave, but then they don't have to pay you ongoing anymore. And this is just the other way around. We're, you know, look at it as we're paying the EU a severance package to not have to continue to pay the money. You know, I'd prefer to be in, but if you want out, you got to pay to get out. It's an early termination fee that you get in any sort of financial thing. And yeah, and as I've already touched on this, at the moment it seems that the UK's must-haves include both immigration control and good trade. What the negotiators on both sides are going to have to figure out is which is the higher priority, but especially us, because like it or not, these things are linked. If ensuring trade is the absolute number one priority, we'll need to either agree to the freedom of movement, or we need to hurry up and agree on everything else so we can get to the stage of the negotiations that start talking about trade. But if control of our borders is the number one priority, then we have to accept that getting the trade stuff sorted out is going to take a while. You know, it's just, you know, problem is it's something that feels like the UK's two number one priorities are things that are, you know, they are linked, so you can't have one. Basically, you can't have your cake and eat it. But it's what we want, and obviously our negotiators are trying to go, well, look, we're going to try to negotiate from from a position of strength, like we have any, and kind of, we would rather have no deal than a bad deal. Translation: give us what we want, or we're just going to walk away and let everything fall about around us. And yes, it'll hurt us, but it'll hurt you as well. If you don't want to get hurt, you'll do what we say. Yeah, I'm sorry. I am really, really sorry about my fellow Brits. Or sometimes I think I'm sorry for my fellow Brits, because not a lot of us think that way, or at least not all of us think that way. But just some, it really is a case of give me my own way or I'll let the world burn. I'm sorry, that's a supervillain's point of view, not a civilised bloody country. It's a mess, but it's not an insurmountable mess. But the other part, I think, and I see this an awful lot, whether it's, when companies are restructuring, when it's people moving house, heck, when it's, even, I guess, things like recovering from an illness or injury, or, things like that. It's like there's always a point where things have to get worse before they get better. Or at least you can't immediately go from this is where we are, this is where we want to be, we're there. Doesn't always work that way. You've got to have time, you've got to have patience, and sometimes things get worse in the intervening manner. Heck, I had this a few years ago when I went from one set of antidepressant medication to another set of antidepressant medication because the first one that I was on was no longer doing enough for me. And what I've now been on for a good 2 or 3 years is good for me. Going from the citalopram to the fluoxetine, for me, was the right choice. I went through a couple of months of hell because, obviously I was on a lower dose and I was on withdrawal and my anxiety spiked way high. Literally, I was going days at a time feeling like I was wound far too tight and I couldn't see the anxiety ever going away. And now it's at more manageable levels and has been for a while. It was the right decision to do. But there was a very unpleasant transition phase. If I could have gone from old med to new med and get all the benefits without any of the transitional side effects, I would have done. But it wasn't possible. Sometimes it isn't. That's just the way it goes. But, we apparently, want to go from, well, being in the EU doesn't suit, being out does suit, so we want to go from there to there straight away. And we want to immediately then have, our own individual, kind of trade negotiations with the EU and the rest of the world that aren't, based on the EU rules. Fine, well, we've got to get everything sorted first. We can't just go from that to that. But it's like people are just so focused on the end result that they don't care about the transitional phase. And they think that any of the problems with the transitional phase is basically, it's because we're trying to get our own way and people don't like it. It's like, no, you ever tried moving house? You don't go from house A to house B in the blink of an eye and have unless you're ludicrously rich and can afford to buy one place and get it set up before you move out the other, then maybe you might just about be fine. But as a general rule, you've got to pack up all of your stuff, you've got to figure out what you can take, you've got to figure out what you can't take, you've got to figure out what you need to get rid of, you've got to figure out what stuff you're going to need the other side, you've got to close off all your utility bills, you've got to set them up in the new place, you've got to move your phone and your internet, and then chances are, certainly in the UK, you'll be without internet for a few days at best, for a few weeks at worst, and you move from a place that didn't quite suit you to a place that suits you far better, and the end result is far much better, but dear God, the transitional phase messes with your head. And that's what it's going to be like. Brexit is going to be painful. It is going to require compromises. But I think that part of the problem is that the people, especially, I guess the problem is, I think the majority, not all, but the majority of people who wanted out just want it to be in a better place straight away. You know, they want the end result. They don't want any of the transitional crap. The people with a realistic view of what it can be like going from state A to state B had a higher chance of being on Team Remain. Not everybody. I know there are some people who voted Leave who had, you know, who were expecting this and who don't even see it as a bad thing. They just see it as an inevitable side effect of change. And they made their vote knowing that, and I completely respect that. It's the people who cast their votes not expecting any of this crap and not wondering why it's happening, and then thinking, no, this isn't the way it should be, and they've clearly never tried to do any kind of change, a large-scale change before. It's like, no, that's just not how it goes. But yeah, I mean, personally, I think a soft Brexit is the way to go, because I think we want, as a general rule, I think the UK probably could benefit from a little bit more control, but still having some of the advantages of at least kind of patterning some things after what the EU does, if not necessarily being legally beholden to them. You know, I think a well-managed soft Brexit is a completely acceptable second choice to remaining. I think what's happening at the moment is what I was voting Remain to avoid. That's what it feels like at the moment. But time will tell as to, you know, whether it goes well or doesn't. But being that at the very least the working title of this vlog is Brexit Wounds, yeah, that should pretty much inform you of how well I think it's all going to go and how painless it's not going to be. So with that, see ya.